again. Welcome to my podcast, The Steven Sulley Study. Podcast is simply about my take on being a success. The major three areas that I certainly value is your mindset as a person, regardless whether you're in business, an investor, a family person, someone who's working for a big company, or someone's even at university or school. I think it's always in everyone's best interest to have a healthy mindset and an optimistic mindset of your life and how it's going to unfold. Also, I care massively. The second part is training my body and giving it the right things that I need, and that follows on to nutrition. These are the things I typically talk about on my podcast. Today I want to talk about, I always talk to a lot of businesses that at the core of every business is sales, is a great sales team and sales structure and methods and things. I think at the core of salespeople though is people which are in tune with their goals, and they've got a great amount of focus, and their attitude is absolutely on point. And at the core of that is a routine. So I have a routine that I usually stick by most days, certainly 5 or 6 days out the week. I stick to this routine. I call it my routine of a champion. I didn't come up with that title. I actually took it off somebody else, and one day I thought, you know what, I'm gonna take that title and implement it into my own life. So I'll go through these 10 steps, and these might be relevant or beneficial to you. It certainly helped me. And I'll describe why and elaborate why these each point is quite important. So number one, I get up at 1 minute past 5 most mornings. Now the reason being is because I've read many books. I've watched many different successful people on YouTube, and I watched documentaries of them, and it seems to be a common thread that most successful entrepreneurs, millionaires, billionaires, business people, certainly people that are self-driven, they always use their 24 hours right. Because you got to think about it, whether you're rich or poor, whether you're young or old, or it doesn't matter what your background is, we all have one thing in common, which is our 24 hours. And the major difference between, let's say, someone very successful to someone who's not, probably comes down to the way they treat their 24 hours. Are they wasting it? Are they just staying in bed for the sheer sake of staying in bed? Or are they really getting up with a purpose? So I get up at 1 minute past 5 because I believe that if I could get an extra 2 hours advantage over my competition or what I was doing a few years ago, then surely I'm going to become a lot more successful, even by default, because I've got an extra 2 hours in a day. If you turn around to anybody and said, if I could give you an extra 2 hours a day, so rather than 24 hours, you're going to increase it by 2 hours every single day, would you take it? The answer is yes. So I get up at 1 minute past 5, and I don't just sit around. I get up and I travel to the gym. So my second point is training. I make sure that I train pretty much 5 days a week. That's a sweet spot for me. I must train roughly about 5 days a week. Sometimes it's a little bit more. Sometimes if I'm super busy, I can't always get the 5 days in, but mostly it's going to be 5 days a week. So I get up at 1 minute past 5. That's number one. Number two, I head to the gym. Now, looking at other successful people as well, I know people got hundreds of properties, thousands of properties. I know someone who's worth basically £500 million. He's a very good friend of mine. Unofficially, he's a bit of a mentor. I seek advice from him every so often to do with mindset, to do with business, to do with property, and he's always kind of there for me when I ask him a question, even if it's over WhatsApp or go and meet him at the coffee shop or just give him a phone call. He's always very willing and very humble enough to give me a lot of advice. And one thing I noticed about him, even though he's a bit older than me, he continues to train. And he's got so much energy. Even his son, who's about 19 or 20 years of age, they train together, and it's just a phenomenal thing to see. He's got so much life, and he's got so much passion for what he does. Even though he's got all the toys and all the nice lifestyle, and he's got all the best things you can ever want, he's always up and he's always pushing himself. And I continually see him in the gym or training with people. And when I've read other books, there's so many people that talk about even simply going for a run and pushing yourself physically, because it cleanses your mind, and it gets you to thinking in a completely optimistic kind of way. So I go into the gym, I pay for my my sessions. I pay roughly about £300 a month, which sounds like a lot, but I have a personal trainer that tells me what to do, and I don't have to think about when I get into the gym exactly what routine or what I should be doing today. I've got someone directing me, mentoring me during that session. And the great thing about that is I've done it before when I've gone into a gym, and after about 15 or 20 minutes, I'm thinking I cannot be bothered here, which is human nature. Every so often you're not going to feel like it. And I've literally convinced myself that I've done enough, and I go down to the spa, down to the swimming pool, and I walk out of a gym, and when I speak to people, I say, yeah, I've trained, and really I haven't, and I've just convinced myself. So the good thing about a personal trainer, number one, you're paying for it, which is an investment. The best investment you can make is in yourself. And trust me, yeah, the books and everything else is great, and eating the right food, but I can't even emphasize enough how important it is to get a personal trainer, the right one as well. Someone that actually knows what they're doing. They're qualified by experience. You know, they've been around the right people that help certain athletes. I've got two main people that train me. I have a guy called Charlie Beat, who is part of Adam Booth's camp over down at Like to Box and Like to Lift, which is actually his gym. So he owns the gym, strength and conditioning gym at the bottom, and at the top is the boxing gym. So he's around a lot of athletes, and he's helped a lot of key athletes to get to a high standard. And that's the kind of person I want training me, someone that is used to training athletes. Also, I use a guy who's a very good friend of mine, a guy called Ruben Tabares, who was in David Hayes' corner. He's been Tiny Temper's trainer, or still currently is, Dynamos, and there's been a list of people. And these are the kind of people I want to be around, because they're not just good at what they do, but the way they talk as well is really, really important. The way they push you, even mentally, is absolutely key. I've seen some personal trainers that they tell you what to do and then they're on their phone, and they're the kind of people you don't want to be around. So definitely putting yourself through your paces by training is absolutely important. And I do believe if you sweat more in the gym, you're going to bleed less in your business. You're going to bleed less on the streets, as some of the boxing sayings go. It's just going to set you up, because you get used to pain in the gym, and I think that's really, really important. The next thing, number 3. So on the way back from the gym, I don't just use the 45-minute drive back for time just to let my wander. I always put on a podcast. So right now I'm listening to a few different podcasts. Rob Moore, it goes without saying, he's my own mentor for my my podcast. He's got the Disruptive Entrepreneur. He's got a second one called Money. I've personally been subscribing heavily on the Disruptive Entrepreneur. I like even the little sound bites I get from it. I listen to another guy called Andy Frisella. I like him a lot because he's a no-nonsense kind of guy. He's got a podcast called the MFCEO. There's also Grant Cardone, and there's a bunch of other people. I listen to Progressive Property as well, because quite naturally I'm in the property space. And I'm very much on my journey. You know, I've been in it for a couple of years now, coming up to a couple of years, and I'm still learning all the time. There's so much knowledge and regulation and law and different strategies that you can learn with property. So I'm regularly listening to a different property podcast just to keep myself up to date with a couple of things. I feel that when I'm driving back and I'm listening to a 45-minute podcast, I really do take a lot in, and if I find anything which is really relevant, I'll go back to that podcast, write it down, and try and implement it into my day or into my routine. So I got this little trick about leveraging your time. So if you're on a run, why don't you leverage your time by listening to a personal development podcast, which I've done this morning? Or if you're driving, why don't you listen to a podcast? Or even if you're on the train or something like that, you might as well listen to a podcast and leverage your time, because otherwise that time could be quite wasted. Right, next one, number 4. So when I get in, I know this is going to sound quite obvious, but I come across a lot of people that don't do this. I eat really good foods. So my typical regime in the morning is eating a lot of superfoods. I cut out a lot of meat during the week. There's a couple of reasons behind it. Number one, I've read a lot of health benefits by becoming a lot more focused on being vegan. I'm not saying I'm completely vegan, but Monday to Friday I've cut out meat, and I do have the odd little bit of fish here and there, but mostly plant-based stuff and fruit. So what I have in the morning is I typically have distilled water. I'll get into the whole reasons behind this later on in probably another podcast. But I have distilled water, which is really, really clean water. It cuts out all the rubbish out of your tap water. I have inside there chia seeds, very good with omega-3s and healthy fats, and a source of protein. I have plant-based protein. I have bee pollen. I'm having raw cocoa. I'm having banana in there, and there's a list of other things like hemp seeds and flax seeds, and there's all kinds of other stuff in there. And I have that in the morning with a handful of almonds and a handful of goji berries. And even though it doesn't sound like a lot, that will last me for a few good hours. Being on the telephone and being a salesperson, even face to face, I heard once a guy say to me who was very, very good at sales, he said that when you haven't eaten in the morning and you are physically hungry, you send off the same signals to somebody as if you were unsure. So it's so important to be eating in the morning, especially after you train, to replenish your body, but more importantly, set you up for the day. If you've got no fuel in your body, I don't see how the hell you're going to become a success. It's going to be very, very difficult for you to maintain a healthy level of energy and therefore serve your clients and give value to your customers, and most importantly, your company. It's so important to make sure that you're fueling your body right. Okay, next one, number 5. So I leverage my time by doing a few things at number 5. I obviously get showered to clean myself. I get dressed, but also in the background, I'm having the news on. The reason why I think it's important to leverage your time and also have the news on in the background is, even if you're not writing things down, I think it's so important that if you're getting into business and if you're an investor, you must know what's going on with current affairs nationally and internationally. So knowing what's going on with the Bank of England, with the banks, with interest rates, inflation, knowing what's going on with maybe certain kind of stock, blue chip stock, knowing what's happening with tax increases or tax cuts or local spending, changes. All these kind of things matter because it shows that you're well-rounded, and most importantly, it helps you guide your clients, your customers, and your company and yourself, your employees, during, let's say, times of change or maybe even times of adversity. The next one, number 6. I like to read, and during the time I'm reading, I like to highlight key points. So I get a train into London most days, and during that, let's say, 17, 18-minute journey, I'm not wasting that time by just sitting around and playing on my phone. I'm reading. So I'm reading currently right now Rob Moore's book, which is Life Leverage, which I find it really, really useful. But I'm not just reading the book and going through it, I'm highlighting it, which means I'm participating. And my opinion on that is, when you actually read, highlight it and read it back, you're actually going to absorb more of the principles and the fundamental lessons inside that book. The saying is, leaders are readers and big earners are always learners. So if you keep on learning, whether that's through podcasts, reading, being around right people, it's going to factor into your self-worth, and then your net worth will go up later on. And as your self-worth and your networking increases and expands, then you're going to attract all the right things into your life. Next one, number 7, affirmations. Affirmations are personal, positive, and present. I tend to do these most days. Admittedly, there has been days where I've come off of it for whatever reason, but then when I find that I've had a bit of a dip in maybe my attitude or even maybe my performance, I go back to the affirmations. And I like to add number 8 into this, which is incantations. So number 7 is affirmations, number 8 is incantations, which is basically the same thing as an affirmation, but doing it standing up, looking yourself in the mirror, and literally telling yourself what you're going to be achieving. So a typical affirmation incantation is, I am going to achieve X, Y, Z, whatever your goal is, by the 30th or 31st of July 2018, and maybe saying it out 5 times to yourself. I feel like when you say it and embody what you're trying to say and what you're trying to achieve, you're much more likely to engage the law of attraction. People have got loads of different perceptions or takes on law of attraction. For me, law of attraction works by thinking about something positively, but then talking about it in a positive way. So sending out a signal out into the universe, but then most importantly, acting upon it every single day. You cannot sit on your ass in a room somewhere, in your bedroom, for example, and expecting that you're going to get all the money in the world, the family that you want, the education that you want, maybe the car that you want, the house that you want, if you're not going out there and working for it. So part of the law of attraction for me is doing affirmations and incantations. If you look at fighters, so I mentioned in my introduction that I have had boxing fights, I've had 14 fights, I continue training and sparring. And one thing I've noticed about a lot of MMA fighters or boxing fighters, when they go into a weigh-in and they're being interviewed or even doing a face-off, how they're talking, they're not saying, I'm going to try my best and I'm hoping I'm going to win. They are literally saying to the other person, I'm going to knock you the F out. And whether or not that is your kind of style, the principle is they are saying an incantation, an affirmation, which they truly are believing in and they are embodying it. And if you look at people like Conor McGregor, Floyd Mayweather, any of the top people in their sport or in their craft, they continue to do the affirmations and incantations. So as a salesperson, as a business person, as someone that wants to bet yourself, using this every single day, I think is a healthy tool, and it gets you in the right state of mind. Because there are going to be days where you don't feel like it, and by training, eating the right things, and then doing your incantations is definitely going to get you in the right peak state. Number 9, as I mentioned before, on number 5 was to look at the news. So when I get into work, I literally pick up a paper, I literally go onto the internet, and I will look at the BBC, Financial Times, Daily Mail, Bloomberg, any one of these top news papers, and I will highlight certain things which are going on in current affairs. My typical rule is this: I get a pad and I write today's date. I then will write a heading which is relevant to me. So it might say something along the lines of Barclays Bank fined £80 million by the FCA, for example, and that might be reported in the BBC. So I write down where the source is from, the BBC, I write down the headline, and then I write down who actually said it. And the reason why I use this is because when it comes down to speaking to clients, certainly about financial products, I need to show them that I have a wealth of information, that I am studying the markets, and more importantly, I know how to articulate these things. So I explain to someone as a let's say as a spin, what this source, what the BBC is actually trying to say in this, and how it could actually be affecting them or many current people who are investing, who have businesses, who are maybe not aware about these current situations. So my typical rule is this: write down 1 to 3 of these bullets or headlines every single day. And the key is only to write down the ones that you understand. There's no point in writing down a bullet which you do not understand. It sounds too technical. Bearing in mind, sounding technical may sound interesting, but it may not serve you because you might make things sound very complicated. Simple is the answer. Making things simple for anyone to understand is the absolute key. So, for example, there's no point in writing down something like quantitative easing, for example. The government or the chairman of the Bank of England is now saying they're going to increase quantitative easing by X, Y, Z in the next 2 or 3 quarters. If you don't know what quantitative easing means, which is simply printing money, there's no point of writing it down. There's definitely no point of getting into a conversation with that. The honesty is the best policy. So if anyone ever talks to you about certain things that you do not understand, I always simply say, do you know what? It's not an area I'm familiar with, but I'm going to go and find out exactly what that is, or get advice from one of my mentors. And I think that builds you a lot of credibility. The last one, number 10. As a salesperson, but even if you're not directly in sales, I believe at the core of every successful business is sales. You need to warm yourself up. And if you're going to be talking to people on a regular basis, which I'm sure you are, which I certainly am, I warm up my voice. So I'll be literally doing some role play. I'll literally be increasing my volume, bringing it back down, increasing it, like I'm gonna, you know, be in the opera, or I'm going to be performing on stage or something like that. Because the way I see it is, I'm a sales athlete. If I'm on the telephone, or if we're going to go and meet someone, I need to be all warmed up. An athlete, someone like Usain Bolt, who's going to run the 100 meters, who's going to try and break his own world record, and you know, he's got the whole world looking at him. He's not just going to get onto the track and then suddenly just do the run. He's going to warm up, even if that's behind the scenes. So you need to warm up every single day in order to make sure that your muscles in even in your face and in your body, and also your voice box is completely warmed up, so you sound very natural, you sound very empowered, you sound very passionate and enthusiastic. And I think that is another thing that a lot of let's say people coming into sales, or people that disregard certain things, they overlook warming yourself up, and sometimes they wonder why it takes them very long to get into the day and get any kind of results. So that's my 10 things. That's my routine of a champion. Thank you for subscribing to another episode of the Steven Sulley Study. All I would ask for you to do is, if you get any value from this, please recommend me to friends, family, or anyone that you feel that can benefit from this. I'm very humble if you have done that already. I'm not doing this for money. I'm literally just here to try and serve and help other people, and just let other people know what I've encountered during my time on this planet of 32 years. I've made a lot of success, but I've made a lot of fuck ups during my time, and I'm here to share all this because I feel like it could serve other people. My little send-off saying is, be happy but never content. Thank you for subscribing. Cheers.